A Marine veteran stood in handcuffs, accused of violence, while the system prepared to dismiss him like another broken man. Then the only person who had ever saved his life walked into court wearing the medal she earned in battle. This is not just a courtroom story. It is a brutal look at trauma, bias, power, and the moment one woman forced a failing system to finally see the human being in front of it.
"Take it off," Judge Harold Kessler ordered, his finger levelled at the woman in the last row. His voice sliced through the chamber's silence. Every head turned, every breath was held. The gavel's strike echoed like a gunshot. I said, "Remove it now, or I will hold you in contempt." The woman's face was a mask of calm. Her unblinking eyes met his as she spoke 5 words that altered the room. "It is authorized, Your Honor." The judge was profoundly mistaken. He had just dressed down a national hero, and his outburst was witnessed by someone of immense power. If this story resonates, please subscribe to follow the journey. Tell me in the comments where you are from. I am curious about this story's reach. Her phone buzzed at 6:14 a.m., but Emma Colton was already awake. 4 a.m. was her rising time, a combat zone cadence her body wouldn't relinquish. Seated on her mattress in a sparse Norfolk apartment, she held a mug of cold coffee. She took the call. "Hello, Emma, it's me." The man's voice on the line was unravelling with each word. "They arrested Danny last night. He's in the county jail." Emma set her mug down carefully. "Who brought him in?" "Norfolk PD. They're saying he assaulted some guy near a bar." "Emma, that's not him. Not without a reason." "I know," Emma replied quietly. "I know precisely what happened. The caller was Maria Ruiz, Danny's sister. Her calls had been a fixture for 3 years, sometimes routine check-ins, sometimes emergencies, always seeking Emma's help. Emma never failed to answer. "His arraignment is today," Maria said, her voice strained. 900 hours. "I can't be there, Emma. I'm in Texas. My mother is in the hospital again." "I can't go. He has no one." Emma shut her eyes, feeling the raw panic travel the 1,000 miles between them. An image of Danny came to her alone in a VA clinic, his hands shaking too badly to fill out forms. "I'll go," Emma vowed. "Emma, you don't have to do that." "Maria, I will be there." She hung up. After a moment of complete quiet, she rose and pulled her work scrubs from the closet. Her 12-hour shift began at 700, but she called the hospital and took a personal day. The charge nurse was surprised. Emma hadn't missed a day in 4 years. She offered no excuse. None was required. Once dressed, she saw her reflection, a 46-year-old woman with weary eyes and steady hands. No makeup, hair pulled back. From a drawer she retrieved a small velvet case. A star-shaped medal on a light blue ribbon rested inside. She felt its heft in her palm, then fastened it to her scrubs over her heart. She hadn't worn it in years, not since the formal presentation, not since they named her a hero, and she had corrected them, saying she only did her job. But this was a different duty. This wasn't for her. Her old Honda Civic, with its 200,000 miles and a large dent, took her to the Norfolk courthouse. She fed the meter 4 quarters and entered. The building was already a swarm of tense activity. Lawyers rushed past with papers while families sat on benches, their faces etched with fear and rage. A guard waved her through security, barely noticing her. She was just another person in scrubs, completely invisible. She found courtroom B and took a seat in the rear. The room was not crowded. Attorneys spoke in low tones, a clerk organized files, and 2 bailiffs stood by, looking bored. On the bench was Judge Harold Kessler. She did not know the man or his standing. She did not know that lawyers nicknamed him the Hammer for his harshness. She was unaware of the 3 formal complaints filed against him, or that he once made a 19-year-old witness break down in tears. She knew nothing of this, but her lesson was about to start. The first matter was a young man charged with minor theft. His lawyer had barely started when Kessler cut him short. "Is your client guilty or not, counsellor? I haven't got all day." The attorney stammered. "Your Honour, we request—" Denied. "What's the plea?" "Not guilty, Your Honour." Kessler leaned back, staring at the defendant with disgust. "Trial is set for March 15th. Next." The whole exchange took 30 seconds. No justice. Just a man wielding a gavel, moving people through a system, Emma observed. She sat silently, her hands clasped, watching it unfold. A DUI case was handled in less than a minute. A domestic dispute took even less. The pattern was fixed. He would interrupt, deny, and overpower, mistaking his position's authority for absolute rule. Then the clerk spoke Danny's name. Case number 7421. The People versus Daniel Ruiz. Charge of aggravated assault. Emma sat up straighter. A bailiff led Danny in from a side door. The orange jumpsuit hung on his frame. His hands were cuffed. A dark bruise was on his cheek, a cut above his eye. He seemed worn down, but Emma saw him clearly despite the years and the damage. She knew the set of his shoulders, leaning forward like a man who has learned to anticipate a strike. She knew his eyes, dark and surveying the room, just as they had once scanned the hills of Helmand Province. Danny Ruiz, Sergeant First Class, retired Marine, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 Purple Heart Medal, 1 traumatic brain injury, 1 honourable discharge, and now 1 pair of handcuffs. He didn't notice Emma. His eyes remained fixed ahead, as per his training. He stood next to a public defender who seemed barely out of school, her hands unsteady on a small file. Judge Kessler looked at Danny, but did not see a Marine. He saw a number on his docket, and a convict in orange, and that was enough. "Mr. Ruiz, the charge is aggravated assault. How do you plead?" The defender stood. "Your Honour, my client pleads not guilty. We also request a reduction in bail. Mr. Ruiz is a Marine Corps veteran, no prior convictions. He is not a flight risk." "A veteran," Kessler repeated, his tone laced with contempt. "It seems most of the defendants in here are veterans." "That's no excuse for violence, counsellor." The lawyer flushed. "Your Honour, that wasn't my implication. Bail is $50,000. Next case?" "Your Honour, wait, Mr. Ruiz is unable to. I said, next case." Danny stood without expression. He made no plea. He just lowered his head slightly, a gesture of someone accustomed to being overlooked. And then Kessler's eyes fell upon Emma. He didn't notice her face or her uniform. He noticed the medal. A small golden star on a pale blue ribbon glinted, and his gaze fixed on it. He stopped. He narrowed his eyes. Leaning over the bench, he pointed directly at Emma. "You, in the back, on your feet." Everyone turned toward her. Emma stood with purpose, her arms at her sides. "What is that thing on your shirt?" Kessler demanded. "A medal, Your Honour," Emma replied, her voice steady. "I can see it's a medal. What is it?" "The Medal of Honour, Your Honour." A murmur swept through the courtroom. People looked at each other. The clerk glanced up. A bailiff straightened his back. Kessler's face became a mask of cold fury. He stared at Emma, his judgment already made. "The Medal of Honour," he repeated, his voice thick with ridicule. "A nurse like you was given that medal?" "I expect nothing, Your Honour. I am simply answering your inquiry. Take it off." The command was sharp, silencing the courtroom. It wasn't just quiet, it was a total absence of sound as everyone held their breath. Emma did not move. "Your Honour, this is an authorized decoration. It is my legal right to have it on." Kessler's gavel slammed down, cracking the wood. "I told you to remove that medal. Now. I will not have stolen valour in my courtroom. It is a disgrace." The insult hung in the air. its intent obvious. A woman, a nurse, not the conventional image of a war hero. Emma's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed level. "With all respect, sir, I was decorated for my service in a combat theatre. I am entitled to wear this?" "You earn no such thing," Kessler spat. "You are an impostor, and you are disrupting this court. Bailiff, if she does not remove that medal in 30 seconds, take her into custody." The nearest bailiff tensed, his conflict visible. He looked from the judge to Emma, and then to the medal. A hint of recognition crossed his face, a look from a man who also served. He didn't move. "Bailiff," Kessler bellowed, "did you fail to hear me?" The bailiff answered carefully. "Your Honour, I believe that is a genuine I don't care what you believe." "I gave you an instruction." He took a reluctant step toward Emma. Her calm eyes met his, and something in her expression stopped him cold. It wasn't defiance, nor was it fear. It was a deep stillness forged in a place he could not fathom. He stopped. The courtroom doors opened with a slow, heavy sound. All eyes turned. A man in a full navy dress uniform entered, his chest covered in ribbons. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulders. He stood perfectly erect, his face a picture of resolve. The sharp taps of his shoes on the marble floor were a sound of natural authority. He walked down the aisle, his eyes fixed ahead. He moved with the confidence of someone who had stared into absolute chaos and held his ground. Stopping in the aisle's centre, he faced Emma and said one thing: "Iron Widow." Emma closed her eyes for an instant, then opened them and gave a small nod. "Admiral." The man then turned to face the bench. "I am Rear Admiral Thomas Callahan of the U.S. Navy Special Warfare Command, Your Honour." Kessler's mouth fell open, but he was silent. "That woman whose medal you insulted," the Admiral stated, "is retired Chief Petty Officer Emma Colton. She was attached to SEAL Team 4 as a Navy nurse during Operation Enduring Freedom. The President awarded her the Medal of Honor for her extraordinary valor in a Helmand Province ambush. She dragged 3 injured Marines, Sergeant Daniel Ruiz among them, over 400 meters of exposed ground while under withering fire." He paused, letting his declaration settle in the quiet room. Under fire, she used her sidearm to eliminate 2 enemy combatants while shielding a downed Marine with her own body. Though wounded by 3 separate gunshots, she administered aid until every man was evacuated. She nearly died from blood loss on the flight out, waving off medical attention until her patients were stabilized. The Admiral took a step forward, his voice dropping to a low, powerful tone that seized the courtroom's attention. "That medal she wears was not stolen, Your Honour. It was earned with her own blood, and the blood of the men she rescued. One of those men is in your court now, in handcuffs." He indicated Danny Ruiz. Danny's head snapped up, his eyes finding Emma's for the first time. In that one look, every wall he had built, the numbness, the silence, his resolve to endure crumbled into dust. Her name formed on his lips, a silent plea that became a ragged whisper. Iron Widow. Emma met his gaze, not with tears or a smile, but with the same unshakable nod she gave him 10 years ago on a bloody field litter, when he begged her not to let him die, and she promised he would make it. "I told you I'd find you, Danny." The file fell from the public defender's hand, its pages scattering unnoticed on the floor. She was frozen, her gaze shifting between Emma, Danny, and the Admiral, unable to comprehend the scene unfolding. Kessler gripped the bench, his face paling as his knuckles turned white. The gavel sat before him, a symbol of authority he no longer possessed. He tried to form a word, but the Admiral spoke over him. "I did not plan to be here, Your Honour. A former teammate alerted me 30 minutes ago that a judge was publicly shaming Chief Petty Officer Colton with baseless accusations." Callahan's eyes pinned Kessler with an unforgiving stare. "I have given testimony to Congress and briefed 4 presidents. I have stood graveside for soldiers who gave everything for this country. Never, in all my years of service, have I seen a more shameful lack of respect than I witnessed in this room." Somewhere in the gallery a woman began to cry. She was not the only one. "I drove here from the Pentagon in rush hour," Callahan said, "because some obligations cannot wait. Defending the honor of someone who once defended mine is one such duty." He looked to Emma, his voice softening. "Chief, you will not take that medal off for anyone." "Not today. Not for any reason." A flicker of defiance raised Emma's chin. "I know, sir." A faint smile appeared on the Admiral's face. "There's the Iron Widow, I remember." He addressed Kessler one last time. "I strongly suggest you reconsider your conduct this morning, Your Honor. Not just for this case, but for every case you have handled with such carelessness. Be assured nobody in this room will forget what happened here, nor will I." Without waiting for a response, he stepped back and stood at parade rest. His presence commanded the room with an authority that came not from a title, but from a lifetime of service and sacrifice. It was the authority of a man who knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the woman standing silently at the back of the room deserved every honor she wore. Kessler remained on his bench, for the first time in his professional life, completely stunned into silence. The courtroom was still. At the defendant's table, Danny Ruiz wept freely, tears tracing paths on his face as he stared at the woman who had pulled him out of hell only to come here and ensure he didn't have to fight this battle by himself. And Emma Colton stood her ground, composed, resolute, and complete. The gavel was forgotten. The time was 9:27. Nobody stirred. The silence was broken only by the hum of the overhead lights and the sound of Danny Ruiz's uneven breathing. Judge Kessler looked as if he had been physically struck, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. He looked from the Admiral to Emma to the bailiff who had ignored his order. For what was likely the first time in more than 15 years, Norfolk County lawyers would later agree, Harold Kessler had nothing to say. The public defender, Sarah Chen, was the first to move. She knelt to pick up her scattered papers, her hands trembling so much they rustled audibly. She clutched the file to her chest and stood, looking at Danny as if seeing him for the first time. She had received his file only 45 minutes prior, knowing only his name and the charge against him. Now she was representing a man who had been carried off a battlefield by a recipient of the Medal of Honor. She was completely lost. Danny's eyes stayed on Emma, his face bruised and tear-streaked, his wrists bound. He kept blinking, as if trying to accept that she was real. "Emma," he mouthed, nothing more. She gave a slight nod. "Sit down, Danny. We're not done." He obeyed instantly. It was not a command from a superior. It was that when Emma Colton spoke, you obeyed. The last time she had ordered him to do something, it was to stay conscious while he was bleeding out, and her voice had been his only anchor to the living world. Admiral Callahan remained in the aisle, his posture unyielding, his eyes fixed on the judge. He didn't need to cause a scene. His presence was the scene. The ribbons on his chest told a story of service, each one a testament to the fact that this man had earned the right to stand wherever he pleased. Kessler finally found his voice, a weak imitation of its usual authority. "Admiral Callahan, I acknowledge your service, but this is my courtroom, and I will not." "Your Honor," Callahan's voice was quiet but cut through the air, "I am not here to give you orders. I am here because a man of immense character was just dishonored in a place dedicated to justice. My point has been made. What you do next is up to you." Kessler's jaw tightened. His fingers brushed against the gavel, then recoiled. He looked out at the gallery, at 30 pairs of eyes watching him. Some were furious, some tearful. An older man in a faded Marine Corps hat shook his head slowly, his expression a mask of cold fury familiar to any veteran who has seen their service disrespected. "Your Honor," Sarah Chen's voice sliced through the silence, surprisingly strong. In light of this information, I move to reconsider bail for my client, retired Marine Corps Sergeant Daniel Ruiz. Kessler glared, but she did not look away. My client served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. He received the Purple Heart for a traumatic brain injury sustained in the same ambush that nearly killed him. For 10 years he has struggled with post-traumatic stress and has been repeatedly failed by the VA. The incident that brought him here was not malicious. It was a trauma response. His mind reacted to a perceived threat as if he were back in combat. She paused, closing the file. She didn't need it anymore. The man he is accused of striking grabbed his shoulder from behind in a crowded bar. Sergeant Ruiz reacted based on his training and his trauma. It wasn't a conscious act, it was instinct. And instead of receiving help, instead of anyone recognizing a crisis, the police arrested him and held him for 12 hours with no phone call. A crack appeared in Kessler's composure. It was a faint glimmer of guilt in his eyes, barely perceptible. The woman in this courtroom, Sarah continued, is here because my client's sister called her from 1,000 miles away, where she is with their dying mother. Chief Petty Officer Colton was the only person who came for him. She came here today, on her own accord, wearing her Medal of Honor. Not as a display, but to show this court that the man in these restraints is not a criminal. He is a casualty of war, and he has been let down by the system, and by you. The accusation hung in the air with undeniable power. Sarah's hands started shaking again, but she stayed on her feet. A 5'3", 28-year-old lawyer standing up to a judge who terrified veteran litigators. Callahan offered her a subtle nod of approval. Danny stared at the table. He was gripping the edge so hard his knuckles were white. He was trying to keep himself composed, but a decade of buried trauma was roaring to the surface. Kessler's eyes landed on Danny, really looking at him now, the bruises, the haunted expression, the way he held himself as if expecting a blow, the tremor in his shackled hands. "Sergeant Ruiz," Kessler said. Danny looked up sharply. "Is the Admiral's account correct? You were in Helmand Province?" Danny's throat worked. "Yes, sir." "And it was Chief Petty Officer Colton who saved your life?" Danny looked to the back of the room, where Emma stood like a statue, the medal a bright spot on her chest. She gave him no signal, only that same unwavering look that had always told him he mattered. "She did more than save my life, sir." Danny's voice broke. "She gave it back to me." A woman in the gallery let out a choked sob. The man in the marine hat lowered his head. The court clerk froze, her own eyes filling with tears. "I was 22, Danny whispered. He didn't request permission. The words just burst out, a flood from a barricade that had collapsed. 22 and I thought I was a king. We all did. You need that mindset for the job. Then the ambush hit, and my world ended in 3 seconds. A shot ripped through my leg, another took my shoulder. I was down and couldn't see, only gunfire and screams. I knew this was it. I was dying in the sand." He paused as the court held its breath. Then she was there, from nothing. 1 second I was fading out. The next she was pulling me, not comforting me, but ordering me, yelling, "You will not die today, Marine, not while I'm here. Copy?" And I did. Her voice cut through the noise. He wiped his face with chained hands. She dragged me 400 meters. She was wounded too, I learned later. Bleeding out, but didn't say a word. She just kept going until we hit the exfil point. When the chopper came, she insisted they take me first. She ensured they took every last one of us. A corpsman told me she almost bled out on that field, refusing aid until we were all loaded. He fixed his gaze on Kessler. "The woman you branded a fraud, the one you commanded to take off her medal, she is why I am still breathing, why I saw my mother again, why I held my baby niece, Every day I've had since is a gift from her." A heavy, unbreakable silence settled in the room. Kessler removed his glasses, setting them on the bench as he pressed his fingers to his eyes. When he lowered his hands, his face was different. Not softer, but exposed, the mask of judicial anger gone. What remained was raw humanity. "Chief Petty Officer Colton," Kessler's voice was low. Emma met his gaze. "Your Honor, I owe you an apology." The words hung in the stillness. For a man like Kessler it was a colossal surrender. His entire career was built on absolute certainty. Now he spoke the words the entire room was waiting for. "What I said to you was inexcusable. My judgment was flawed. My ego clouded my duty, and in doing so I brought dishonor to you and everyone who serves this country." Emma gave a single, firm nod. "Accepted, Your Honor." Just 2 words. No victory, no anger. She took his apology with the same solid composure she had taken his insult, anchoring the courtroom. Kessler turned to the defence. "Miss Chen." "Yes, Your Honor." "I am reducing Sergeant Ruiz's bail to his own recognizance." "Release him." Sarah felt a wave of relief so strong her knees shook. "Thank you, sir. I am also ordering a complete review of the arrest and an immediate mental health evaluation for Sergeant Ruiz with the VA. If the prosecution moves forward, they must first prove he needs a cage over care." He stopped. "The contempt charge I intended to file is also dismissed." His eyes found Emma. "Chief Petty Officer Colton, that medal is always welcome in this court." Emma remained silent, simply resuming her seat as the bailiff approached. He leaned close, his voice intended only for her. She met his gaze, and her controlled expression finally broke, with a hint of understanding that required no words. The bailiff returned to his post. If anyone asked later what he said, he'd just say, "That was between the chief and me." Danny's release was processed in an hour. The cuffs came off at 10:45. He stood, rubbing his wrists, his eyes blinking in the sudden light. Beside him Sarah Chen gathered her files, her mind already on the next move. She'd entered with a hopeless case, and left with a new mission. Admiral Callahan was waiting in the hallway. As Danny came out, the Admiral shook his hand, holding it a moment too long. "How are you holding up, son?" Callahan asked. Danny's jaw tightened. "Some days are a war, sir." "I know. It doesn't end, but you get better at fighting it. It gets smaller." Danny just nodded, unable to speak. The Admiral pulled a card from his pocket. "This is a direct line for the Seal Family Foundation. Call that number tomorrow, not next week. Tomorrow morning they'll be expecting you." Danny took the card as if it were a lifeline. "And Danny," Callahan's voice softened, "she came across town for you. Don't waste it. Do you copy?" "Yes, sir." With a firm squeeze of the shoulder, the Admiral was gone. His steps echoed on the marble, the sound of a mission accomplished. Emma, leaving the courtroom last, found Danny alone, clutching the card and a bag with his belongings. He turned as she approached. 10 feet of silence stretched between them. The hall began to empty. A custodian swept by, eyes down. The sounds of the courthouse rushed in. "You shouldn't have been here," Danny said. "I had to be." "How did you find out?" "Maria called me." He squeezed his eyes shut. "She shouldn't have. You've done enough, Emma, more than enough." Emma closed the distance. "Danny, look at me." His eyes opened. "Remember the medevac?" "Which one?" "The second one. When you ordered me to leave you behind?" His chin quivered. "You said we never leave our people." "That's right. I meant it then. I mean it now. This isn't the sandbox. You're not bleeding. But you're hurt, and you need help. I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." Danny's lips formed a thin line as he looked at the wall. Meeting her eyes would shatter him, and he'd already broken once today. "I'm a mess." Emma, he breathed. A total mess. I don't sleep, can't hold a job. A truck backfires, and I'm back in the province. 3 years back, you made me go to the VA. They put me on a wait list for 4 months. After 4 months, the doctor saw me for 11 minutes and wrote a script. 11 minutes. That's all my service was worth to them. I know, she replied. The system is broken. I see it at the hospital every day with our vets. But the system failed you. I will not. She took a folded piece of paper from her pocket. She held it out to him. What is this? He said. It's the info for a doctor at Portsmouth Naval, Dr. James Whitfield. He works with combat trauma, TBI, and PTSD. He's one of the top guys, and he's expecting your call. Danny took the paper. He read the name, the number. He folded it back up, pressing it to his chest. You've already called him, Danny said. At 6:30 this morning, before I drove here. He can see you this week. Danny's control finally snapped. He turned away, covering his mouth with a hand. His shoulders began to shake. He'd survived firefights and IEDs, a decade of bad dreams, only to be taken apart by a simple phone call in a hallway. Emma waited. She held her ground, patient and solid, letting him have the space to feel it. When he faced her again, his eyes were red, his breath steady. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just be there. Be there for yourself, the way you were always there for us. He nodded. He put the paper in his pocket with the Admiral's card. They walked out of the courthouse together. The morning was bright, the parking lot was busy. Across town, Emma's hospital ward was short-staffed. She thought of the patients, the late meds, the irritated head nurse. Then she looked at Danny Ruiz next to her, free, and knew she was right where she was supposed to be. They reached her Honda Civic. A small smile touched his lips. You're still driving this car? It runs. It barely ran 10 years ago. It got me here to you. He put a hand on the car's roof, hesitating. Emma, what the judge said back there, how do you just brush that off? She looked at him over the roof. What he called me is irrelevant. I know who I am. The people that count know. The rest can learn or not. It makes no difference. She unlocked the doors. Get in. I'm buying you breakfast, then we'll form a plan. He stood there a moment longer, the sun on his face, the day's events on his shoulders. Then he got inside. The engine coughed, turned over, and settled into its usual rhythm. She pulled out, driving toward a waterfront diner she knew, a place with strong coffee and waitresses who didn't rush you. Danny was quiet, watching the city slide by. They said nothing. The silence between them wasn't empty space. It was loaded, filled with all they'd seen, all they'd lost, and everything they were still fighting for. On the dashboard, the Medal of Honor flashed in the sunlight before she made the turn. Emma kept driving. They took a booth at the back of the quiet diner. Old habits die hard. Danny sat, looking at his hands on the table like they belonged to someone else. A waitress came over. Emma asked for 2 coffees and 2 orders of eggs. He didn't protest. He hadn't eaten anything since some chips from a gas station the day before. When the coffee arrived, he held the warm mug, anchoring himself to the moment. Walk me through last night, Emma said, her tone clinical, a sign of trust. Danny stared into his cup. I was at a bar. Which one? Kelly's, over on Granby. I go there sometimes. It's normally quiet. He took a breath. I was by myself at the bar, had 2 beers, that's it. I wasn't looking for trouble, Emma, I swear. I know you weren't. Go on. A few college kids were by the pool table, making noise. I tuned them out. I just wanted a couple hours of peace in my own head. His knuckles were white around the mug. One of them came up from behind me. He put his hand on my shoulder, squeezed, and He stopped, his jaw clenched. Danny, I don't recall what came next. His voice was a faint rasp. I know it sounds like a line, what they all say, but it's not. One instant his hand was on my arm. The next I was pinned by cops and the kid was bleeding. I was gone. I thought I was back in Helmand, that the enemy had me. My body just, it did what it was trained to do. Emma nodded, her gaze fixed. She'd heard this tale before, in many variations, from countless men. New city, different people, same broken circuit. A mind that perceived an enemy in a civilian's gesture. A nervous system still fighting a war the body had left behind. How badly was he hurt? She inquired. A broken nose, according to the report. The punch itself is a void in my mind. Did anyone tell them he put his hands on me first? Danny's laugh was a hollow, joyless echo. Not a soul. The bartender claimed, I just lost it for no reason. Unprovoked. That was the crucial word in the report. Unprovoked. Were there any cameras? Danny glanced up. If there were, nobody brought them up. Emma took out her phone. Described the bartender. Just a regular guy. Mid-30s. Had some ink on his forearm. I'll get his name. She was already working her phone, dissecting the problem while others were still absorbing it. Your counsel is Sarah Chen. She's young but sharp. I saw her work today. She'll pursue the video. Emma, I can't afford a lawyer. I can't even afford gas. She's a public defender, free of charge. And the gas isn't your concern. Your recovery is. We'll handle everything else step by step. Their food arrived. Emma started eating. Danny only stared at his meal. He turned his coffee cup, a nervous habit that echoed how he used to twist his dog tags. Can I ask something? He finally broke the silence. Shoot. Why are you even helping me? Emma set down her fork. Her face held a complex look, far from simple anger or pity. Are you sure you want to know? Yeah. I've wondered for 10 years and never found a good reason. You pulled me from that inferno. Mission done. You got your medal. You got the acclaim. You had every reason to forget me. No one would have judged you. So why this, Emma? Why are you in this greasy diner buying me breakfast instead of at your own job? Emma paused, then reached up, detaching the Medal of Honor from her scrubs. She laid it on the scarred table, its blue ribbon a sharp contrast. See this? Yeah, this was for a single day, just one. 14 minutes of enemy contact, says the report. They threw a whole event for 14 minutes, gave me this medal, and I shove it in a drawer because I can't stomach it. Danny was floored. What are you trying to say? I'm talking about the details they omit from the citation. The part where I pulled you from that kill box, got you to the helicopter, and then woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Germany. A doctor informed me that one of the 3 men I carried out didn't make it. The air grew heavy. The colour drained from Danny's face. Who was it? Corporal Marcus Webb. He was only 20. I carried him 200 metres with shrapnel tearing at my leg. I got him to the landing zone, but he died in surgery 40 minutes later. He bled out internally. Danny's hands went flat against the table. I had no idea. No one ever told me. That's because I made them swear not to. I asked command to keep it out of the official account. I wanted his family to be able to grieve without knowing the person who carried him failed to save him. Her voice was controlled, disciplined, as usual, but a deep tremor existed beneath it, a pressure held in check for years. They gave me this medal for saving 3 Marines, but one of them died. Danny, do you understand? When I look at this, I don't see a hero. I see Marcus Webb. I see his face. The way he looked at me when I told him to hold on, the small smile he attempted, the feeling of his hand going limp right before they loaded him onto the chopper. Danny couldn't speak. He just stared, the entire history he knew of that day shattering and reassembling. So you ask why I'm here, Emma continued. I am here because I failed, Marcus. I carry that burden always. But you, Danny, you survived. You are alive. You are here, and I refuse to watch the country we fought for consume and abandon you." She reaffixed the medal to her uniform. "That is why I am here. Not as a hero, but because the mission is not complete." Danny buried his face in his hands and broke down. This wasn't like the quiet weeping in court. It was a profound, agonizing sob built up over a decade. It burst from a place he never knew existed until her confession broke it open. The waitress approached, took in the scene, and quietly retreated. The cook glanced over, then looked away. The other customers suddenly found their meals fascinating. No one intervened. They all understood to let the moment be. It took 4 minutes for Danny to compose himself. When he looked up, his eyes were bloodshot and his face blotchy. He looked like a man turned inside out, but a massive weight within him had shifted. It hadn't vanished, but it had moved, giving him just enough space in his chest to finally breathe. "I didn't know about Marcus," he said, his voice raw. "Emma, I am so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just be here. That's it." He nodded, then picked up his fork. He ate a bite of his cold eggs, chewing with the slow deliberation of someone relearning a simple act. Emma's phone buzzed. She checked it. Her expression immediately hardened, becoming precise and strategic. "What is it?" Danny asked. "It's Sarah Chen, your counsel." Emma read the message twice. "She says the prosecutor's office just made contact. They're offering a plea deal. Misdemeanor assault, 6 months probation, no jail time." Danny put his fork down. That was fast, too fast. Emma's eyes narrowed. They want this to disappear before anyone investigates what actually occurred, before a formal request for security footage is made, before it gets out that the kid has his own history. Danny looked puzzled. "What?" Emma showed him the phone. Sarah checked his record. "The kid you supposedly attacked, Tyler Brennan, age 23. He has 2 previous assault charges. One was dismissed, the other reduced. And his father is a city councilman." The information landed like a physical blow. Danny read it over and over, his brain trying to fit the pieces together. "His father is on the council," Danny repeated. "Patrick Brennan, District 4. He's on the Public Safety Committee. That gives him influence over the police, the DA, everyone." Danny leaned back as it all clicked. So that's why the bartender lied. It certainly seemed so. And why the police didn't look for video. All evidence suggests it. And Kessler's bail. $50,000 for a man with no criminal record. That wasn't just him being tough, was it? Emma placed her phone on the table. "I can't be certain, but Sarah will investigate." Danny's jaw clenched. The sorrow from moments ago was hardening into something else. Not quite fury, but it's beginning the icy anger of a man who served his country only to see its justice system manipulated by a politician's child. "They thought I would accept the plea," Danny said, his voice flat. "They wanted me to take the charge, get a record, and go away, so no one would learn the kid initiated it. And no one would discover his father covered for him. That's the game plan," Emma confirmed. "And if it wasn't for the Admiral, for you, I'd be locked up, unable to post $50,000, waiting for a lawyer I didn't know to convince me to take a bad deal." "Yes." Danny closed his eyes. When he opened them, the defeated man from the hearing was gone. He was replaced by someone more alert, more driven than he'd been in years. "I'm not taking the deal," Danny stated. "Good. I want that security footage. I want the truth to be known. And I want his father to answer for this." Emma lifted her mug. "Then that becomes our new mission." Her phone rang again, but it wasn't Sarah. It was an unfamiliar number. She answered. "Chief Colton." "You're on. This is Robert Harmon from the Virginia Pilot. I received a tip about what happened in Judge Kessler's court today. I heard a decorated veteran was mistreated by the judge and a Navy admiral intervened. Is this true? Emma locked eyes with Danny. He stared back. This was a new variable. Who is your informant? Emma inquired. My informant is anonymous, ma'am, but the story is going public regardless. I would rather have your account. Emma pulled the phone from her ear, weighing the immense decision. A life in the background was her preference. She'd had the Navy protect her identity, refused all interviews, and turned down a book offer, all to stay out of the spotlight. The objective, not the credit, was always her priority. But this was about more than her. It was about Danny, about a system that had discarded him and a politician who tried to silence him. And sometimes you don't get to choose to stay hidden. Mr. Harmon, she said, I will provide a statement, but under my conditions, state them. This story is not about me. It is about a Marine veteran who was unjustly held and deprived of his rights because a councilman had to shield his son. If you write that story, I'll talk. If you turn this into a puff piece about the medal, we're done. A moment of silence. Fair enough. Can we meet tomorrow? I will reach out with the arrangements. She ended the call, her gaze finding Danny's again. Are you positive? No, Emma admitted. But I'm positive about you. That matters now. She left a 20 on the table as they stepped into the harsh 11:45 light. Just 6 hours prior, she'd assumed it was a normal day. This day was different. She drove Danny to his rundown apartment. He got out, then leaned in. Emma, yeah, that call sign, Iron Widow, you know the real story behind it, don't you? She stared straight ahead. Because I was the last one left alive. That's not it. Danny shook his head. It's because you were terrifying for all the right reasons. The guys said if hostiles saw you coming, they were to retreat. It wasn't your build or your tone. You were an act of God. Nothing, not fire, not wounds, not command itself could make you leave a man behind. Emma's knuckles whitened on the wheel. She waited, her voice unusually low. Marcus Webb never saw that in me. He'd tell you to let the guilt go, and you know it. Her eyes met his for a split second. For that brief, unguarded second, the Iron Widow vanished, leaving only Emma, a woman shouldering a weight she never set down. She'd saved so many, yet lost the one who counted, and lived her life paying for a sin she didn't commit. Contact Dr. Whitfield in the morning, she said. I will. The Admiral's Foundation too. They'll help with rent, lawyers, all of it. I will. And Danny. What? Get some real food tonight, not gas station trash. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Yes, ma'am. He backed away. She drove off, watching him in the mirror as he walked to the door. His gait was steadier now, his posture less hunched. 3 blocks on, she pulled to the curb and killed the engine. Resting her head on the wheel, she let the full weight of it all hit her for a minute. Marcus, Danny falling, the judge's scorn, the Admiral's testimony, the media, the councilman's kid, the broken system, her 4 A.M. demons, everything. She inhaled deeply, counted to 10, straightened up. She engaged the gear and drove. Emma Cullerton understood combat. She'd been wounded overseas. She'd hauled men double her size from the kill zone. She lost someone on a medevac, got a medal she despised, and built a wall around her life. After a decade of quiet, that wall was cracking. An unfamiliar number glowed on her phone. She let it ring. 2 minutes later, another and another. By the time she reached the hospital, 7 unknown numbers had called. In her car, she watched it buzz an 8th time. A leak. Someone in court sent a text and set a fire. Now the world wanted the Iron Widow. Emma took the phone and shut it down. She threw it in her bag exited the car, and entered the hospital for the rest of her shift. She had patients waiting. IVs to monitor, medications to dispense, charts to finish, a job to do. The job she'd done for 4 years. The one she'd do tomorrow, because Emma Colton never stopped, not even when the ground split open. The decoration remained pinned to her uniform. She left it there. By 6 p.m. the story had gone wild. Emma knew nothing, her phone dark in her locker as she finished her shift. Outside the bubble of Norfolk General, the narrative was exploding. Sarah Chen was the first to find out. She was at her desk with a cold dinner, reviewing Danny's case again when a co-worker, Marcus, came in. "Chen, you were in Kessler's courtroom today, right?" "I was." "What's up?" "Look at Twitter." Sarah launched the app. The first thing she saw made her gasp. Someone recorded 17 seconds of audio. It began with Kessler's order. "Remove that," and ended after Emma replied, "It is authorized, Your Honor." An anonymous account posted it at 11:15 a.m. By noon, 10,000 shares. 50,000 by 3. By 6 p.m. it was trending nationally with a hashtag. Sarah put her food down. She picked up her office phone, dialing Danny. He answered after 4 rings. "Hello? It's Sarah Chen, your attorney. Are you on the internet?" "No, I avoid that stuff." "Okay, listen to me. Audio from the hearing is out. It's everywhere. My office is swamped with press asking about you and Chief Colton. I've already fielded 3 calls from TV stations." Danny was silent. "How big is this?" "National news big. CNN covered it an hour ago. Fox is running it tonight. The Virginia Pilot is publishing something. The reporter who called Emma, Robert Harmon. That's him. His piece goes live at 8. Danny, I need to know. Do you want to make a statement?" "No." "Fine, your call. But understand this kind of spotlight cuts both ways. It could save your case or kill it. The public is on your side. On Emma's side. The recording is fatal for Kessler. But if Brennan's team controls the narrative, it will turn." Danny's voice went cold. "Turn how?" "They'll paint you as unhinged. They'll say Emma was a stunt. They will use the assault to say you're exploiting your service for pity." "I've seen it before, Danny. They have deep pockets and no morals. What do you want me to do? Keep your head down. Don't talk to the media. Stay off the internet. Don't take calls you don't recognize. Let me handle it. I'm getting the surveillance footage from Kelly's bar tomorrow. If it has what I think it does, Brennan's whole argument collapses. And if it's gone?" Sarah hesitated. A sharp question from someone conditioned to distrust the system. "Then we pivot," she replied. "We'll cross that bridge when we get there." She hung up and called Emma's number. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same thing. At 7:30, an exhausted Emma departed Norfolk General. Her feet throbbed. Her last 8 hours were a blur of routine. Changing bandages, checking vitals, calming an elderly man before surgery, and comforting a wife whose husband had just gone to the ICU. This was the work, the reason she became a nurse. She took out her phone and turned it on. After a 30-second start-up, the screen exploded. 23 calls, 41 texts, 14 voicemails. The device vibrated non-stop for a full minute. In the silent, sterile garage, her phone was a tempest of alerts. 4 texts were from Maria Ruiz. 6 desperate calls from Sarah Chen. 1 stark message from Admiral Callahan. "Call me, now." 3 voicemails from blocked numbers. Buried in the chaos was a text from a co-worker. "Emma, is that you on video? It's blowing up." She opened Twitter without logging in. The clip was inescapable. She pressed play and heard her own tinny digital voice utter 5 words of defiance to a judge who questioned her honor. She closed the app, leaning hard against her car's cold frame. A hand went to her eyes as she took a measured breath. This was the exact spotlight she had avoided for 10 years. The notoriety she ducked, the history she buried with her decoration. Now it was loose. Not her doing, but the result of one phone capturing a moment that went viral. She called Callahan first. He answered immediately. "Emma, Admiral, I saw it. I figured. Listen to me. This will intensify before it fades. Congress has called, so has the SecNav's office. The story is out of our hands. People are enraged with Kessler. They want blood." "I never wanted to be the story, sir." "Well, you are. Now we decide who controls the narrative. Your silence creates a void that reporters and politicians will gladly fill. Some might be accurate. Most will distort it." Emma was silent, feeling the gravity of his statement. "There's something else," Callahan added. "I looked into Councilman Patrick Brennan." "And?" "Emma, this goes further. His son, Tyler, has a record. 2 arrests, and both times the charges disappeared. In each case, cops were pressured to stand down, and the DA's office misplaced the paperwork. It's a habit. Danny is just the newest casualty." Emma gripped her phone tighter. "Your source?" "An old contact at NCIS, completely unofficial. He's been watching Brennan for a while on an unrelated matter, something bigger. Danny's situation just kicked the whole thing wide open. How big? Can't say over the phone. I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" "Always, sir." "Good. 2 objectives. First, get Sarah Chen on the line. Second, give Harmon a statement tomorrow. Courtroom facts only, nothing more. Brennan is off limits. Sarah will handle that channel." "Understood. And Emma, one more thing." "Sir?" "What you did for that kid today was a courage I rarely see, even in the field. Don't ever forget that." She hung up, watching the hospital's relentless tide of staff move past. Each one fought a private war, carried an invisible weight. At 8:15 she called Sarah Chen, who answered on the first ring. "Emma, thank God. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I was on shift. You saw the news?" "All of it. The Admiral just read me in. He mentioned Brennan, the history." Sarah's voice hardened. "Did he tell you about the other incidents?" "He said cases were buried. A pattern of interference." "It's a cesspool, Emma," Sarah said grimly. "I've been digging for hours. Tyler Brennan's first charge was 2 years ago. A bar fight. Left a man with a shattered jaw. The case was dropped for insufficient evidence despite witnesses and video. Last year he assaulted a woman. He was arrested and released in under 2 hours. Her restraining order was denied. The charge was knocked down to disorderly conduct. A $500 fine." Emma squeezed her eyes shut. "And the woman?" "She fled Norfolk a few months later. I found her in Richmond. Talked to her this afternoon." Sarah's voice wavered. "She just wept, Emma. Said the cops made her feel like the criminal. Brennan's people offered her money. When she refused, her lease was terminated. Her boss got a call from the city about her performance. They ran her out of town. That's the shape of it. Her name is Jessica Torres, and she's ready to testify for Danny. The full scope of it landed on Emma. This wasn't one injustice. It was a methodical campaign of destruction. Sarah, the bar's security footage, how do we get it?" "Subpoenas filed, but there's a problem. The bar is owned by a holding company. Records traced it to an attorney whose main client is Patrick Brennan." A cold dread settled in Emma. "Brennan owns the place." "Through a cutout, yes. That makes the bartender his puppet, not a witness. And that footage proves Danny's story. If they erased it, that's a felony. We've got leverage either way. But understand me, Emma, this will get ugly. Brennan has the money and the muscle to bury us. The second he knows we're coming, he'll attack." "Let him," Emma replied. There was a pause. "You know what you sound like?" "What?" "Someone who's been waiting a decade for the right war." Emma didn't answer. It was true. She drove home to a silent, dark apartment, standing motionless in the living room as her phone vibrated. It was Danny. "I saw the news," he said, his voice strained. "It's everywhere." "I know. They're showing your Medal of Honor picture. You look so much younger." "I was younger, Danny. They started a fundraiser for my defense. Emma, it's at $40,000. She looked at her phone, stunned. $40,000. "In 6 hours," he added. "Sarah said it was 12,000 an hour ago. Now it's 40." Emma collapsed onto the couch. $40,000 from strangers for a man they only knew from a 17-second clip. "People are good, Danny," she whispered. "They see a wrong. They want to right it. What do I do?" "Let Sarah handle it. It goes to your defense. Anything left over helps other vets." "Deal." "Deal." A moment passed. "I called Dr. Whitfield." Emma sat bolt upright. "You did? Couldn't wait." "I left a message for him to call me back." "Good. That's very good, Danny." "And I called that foundation the Admiral mentioned. The woman, Linda. She was kind, Emma. She said they'd help with everything." "Said I wasn't alone." His voice broke. "No one said that to me in so long." "It's the truth," Emma said firmly. "And you'll be hearing it more." She heard his breathing, the measured cadence of a man holding himself together. "There's more," Danny confessed, "about last night. Before that guy grabbed me, I was just sitting there, thinking about checking out for good." The words sucked the air from the room. Her knuckles turned white. "Danny." It wasn't a plan, just doing the final math, wondering who would even notice. "Danny, listen to me." "No, I'm not finished." I was in that headspace when he put his hands on me and training took over. Then the jail cell. I thought that was rock bottom. Then you came. You just showed up, Emma, with that medal on. You were there. You didn't just save me in court. You saved me from myself, just like you did 10 years ago. How do you answer that?" A sob caught in Emma's throat. Alone in the dark, she wept for the first time in years. The man she carried off a battlefield was telling her she'd just done it again. "Danny," she said, her voice steel, "you will call Dr. Whitfield tomorrow. That's an order from your chief. Copy?" "I copy." "And you will answer my phone. Always. I don't care if it's 0400. You answer." "I will. And listen to me. You'll be okay. You made it through a war. You made it through last night. You are still here." A long pause. Then a whisper. "Iron Widow." "Yeah, that's 3 times. Don't make me come for you a 4th. A faint smile touched her lips. "I'll believe it when I see it, Marine." She ended the call, letting the phone drop as the tears on her skin dried. At 10:15 her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Subpoena approved. "We collect the video tomorrow at 0900. If it's gone, I file for tampering and name Brennan. Fundraiser is at 62,000. Also, Jessica Torres is driving down from Richmond to give a statement. Her words, 'It's time someone stopped that family.'" Emma set the phone down, walked to her bedroom, and opened a drawer. She lifted out the velvet case. Inside, the Medal of Honor gleamed. A piece of metal a judge called a disgrace, an admiral called sacred, and a marine called a reason to live. She closed the lid. Tomorrow she would wear it. Tomorrow she would walk into the storm. But tonight she sat on her bed in the darkness. She let herself be just Emma, not the legend, not the hero, just a woman, doing the only thing she knew how, showing up no matter the cost. The clock read 10:32. Across town, Danny Ruiz lay staring at his ceiling, a doctor's number in one hand, an admiral's in the other. He just breathed, telling himself tomorrow would be different. With trembling hands in Richmond, Jessica Torres packed a bag for the 3-hour drive to confront the family who had cast her out. In a newsroom, Robert Harmon polished a front-page story for the Virginia Pilot. Meanwhile, in a wealthy Norfolk neighborhood, a livid Patrick Brennan argued with his lawyer, enraged that a 17-second clip had ignited a national firestorm. None of them would find rest, all knowing the battle from courtroom B had just begun. Sarah Chen arrived at Kelly's bar by 8:55 the next morning, subpoena ready, a deputy at her side. The establishment was locked, the entrance barred. Her first 3 knocks went unanswered. She pounded the wood again. Sarah Chen, Public Defender's Office. I have a court order for security tapes. Open up. Silence. The deputy stepped up. Ma'am, I can call a locksmith. The door edged open. It was the bartender from that night, mid-30s, inked forearm, matching Danny's description. His eyes were red-rimmed with fatigue. I know what this is about, he rasped. Sarah presented the order. Then you know I require Tuesday's footage from 9 p.m. to midnight. The bartender ignored the paper, eyeing it like it was an explosive. We have a problem. A knot tightened in Sarah's gut. What kind of problem? The owner called me late last night, told me to erase everything. The deputy's hand instinctively went to his belt. Sarah gestured for him to stand down. And did you? The man's gaze shifted from her to the officer, then to his own hands. His face mirrored the internal struggle. Emma saw in the bailiff a man deciding his own character. No, he said firmly, I didn't. Sarah exhaled slowly. Can I have it? I can do better than that. He pulled the door wide. I'll show you what happened. The statement I gave the police was a fabrication, and it's been eating me alive. His name was Chris Mullally, age 34, an employee at Kelly's for 3 years. He was aware of the front company and the true owner. He knew when Brennan's son visited, the drinks were free, and any disruption was to be overlooked. It was policy. But Chris's brother served in Iraq. He returned a different man, startled by noises, unable to hold a job, living in his car for 2 years before the VA intervened. After Chris saw the news and heard that recording, realizing the man he helped set up was a decorated Marine, something inside him broke. He pulled up the surveillance feed, 4 distinct angles, high resolution, with perfect audio. Sarah watched as the screen vindicated Danny's entire story. Danny, sitting alone. Tyler Brennan walking over. Brennan's hand gripping Danny's shoulder, yanking him from the stool. Danny's response was a pure, instantaneous reflex, lasting less than 3 seconds. Tyler was suddenly on the floor, clutching his face, while Danny stood over him, his expression not one of anger. It was sheer terror, the look of someone detached from the here and now. That's it, Chris whispered. The kid started it. Your client defended himself. When the cops showed, the kid's buddy called his dad. 20 minutes later, my phone rang with instructions on what to say. Sarah looked at the officer. Secure this evidence now. All angles, time-stamped. Yes, ma'am. She turned back to Chris. Are you willing to testify to this in court? Chris rubbed the tattoo on his arm. An eagle, globe, and anchor. The Marine Corps emblem, same as his brother's. Yes, he affirmed. I'll testify. Sarah phoned Emma at 9:32. Emma was already on the road, using her second ever personal day. We've got it. Sarah's voice was sharp. The video is undeniable. It shows Tyler grabbed him. It was self-defense. The bartender is flipping and will testify that Brennan's people told him to lie. Emma's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. And the order to delete the evidence? Chris Mullally was called at 11:47 last night by David Park, Brennan's attorney, and was told to wipe the system clean. Chris is in the clear, but that call proves obstruction. I'm filing to include Patrick Brennan and David Park in a criminal investigation today. The district attorney's office is in turmoil. This is a catastrophe for them. Mitchell Hayes, the original prosecutor, offered that plea yesterday. I informed him about the video. After 10 seconds of silence, he stammered about needing a supervisor. He knew. That makes him weak, and weak men make errors. As Emma pulled into the Virginia Pilot's parking lot, Robert Harmon was waiting. He was tall, in his 50s, with greying temples and a press badge on his jacket. He extended a hand as she approached. "Chief Petty Officer Colton, I appreciate you coming. Let's make this brief," Emma said. "I have another appointment." Inside a conference room, Harmon indicated a recorder and asked for permission to use it. Emma consented. "Walk me through yesterday," he started. Emma told him everything. Maria's call, the courthouse dash, the judge's reaction to her medal, the Admiral's intervention. She detailed Danny's service, his injuries, and the system that failed him. She described the bar incident, the false charge, the councilman's son's deceit. She held back only one detail, the truth about Marcus Webb. That secret was hers alone. Harmon listened, captivated. When she was done, he turned off the recorder, his eyes on her. "Off the record," he began, "in 27 years of journalism, covering wars and scandals, I have never met anyone like you. I'm not remarkable, Mr. Harmon." "Respectfully, ma'am, that's the only dishonest thing you have said." The story landed at noon, seizing the front page both in print and online. Harmon was true to his word. He focused on Danny's plight, not her heroism. The headline was blunt. "Marine veteran falsely charged. Councilman's son started bar fight. Video shows." Emma's name wasn't mentioned until the 3rd paragraph, her Medal of Honor not until the 5th. It centered on a wounded warrior being crushed by the very system designed to help him. By 1 p.m., the Associated Press had picked it up. By 2, it was on national news. At 3, Norfolk Police initiated a review. At 3:30, the DA's office dismissed all charges. Sarah reached Danny at 3:45. He was in Dr. Whitfield's waiting room at Portsmouth Naval Medical Center, following Emma's orders. "Danny, the charges have been dropped. All of them. You're clear." Danny gripped the phone tightly. He sat in a sterile chair near a water cooler, surrounded by other veterans, some in wheelchairs, others with service animals, all waiting. "Please say that one more time," Danny whispered. "They're gone." The video gave them no choice. "You are free, Danny. Completely free." He bent forward, pressing a hand to his forehead, his eyes squeezed shut. A nearby veteran, a woman in her 40s with a prosthetic limb, saw his quiet struggle. She put a firm, comforting hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, not aggression. He didn't flinch. "Thank you," he murmured into the phone. "Thank you, Sarah." "Don't thank me. Thank Emma, and the Admiral, and Chris Mallory for choosing what was right. And Danny, Dr. Whitfield is waiting. Don't you dare leave. I'm staying right here." At 4 o'clock, Patrick Brennan held a press conference from his home. Flanked by his lawyer David Park, he refuted every allegation. Any knowledge of the fight, any instruction to lie, any connection to the bar. He framed the story as a political assault on his family. The conference lasted 11 minutes, the worst of his political life. At 4:12, a journalist interrupted. "Councilman Brennan, can you tell us why your lawyer called the bartender at 11:47 p.m. last night and ordered him to destroy the security footage?" Brennan's face went pale. He shot a look at Park, who appeared to have been struck by lightning. "That is a baseless accusation," Park stammered. "I have phone records," she shot back. Brennan turned and left the podium without saying another word. Park scurried after him, their retreat filmed by a trio of cameras. By 5 o'clock, the video was viral. By 6, Norfolk City Council had put Brennan on administrative leave. By 7, the Virginia State Bar launched an ethics probe into Park. By 8, Internal Affairs was re-examining every case that involved Tyler Brennan. Jessica Torres arrived in Norfolk at 4:30 that afternoon. She had made a 3-hour trip from Richmond with a small bag and a folder she had protected for over a year, full of documents she knew would one day be needed. Sarah greeted her at the office. Jessica was slight and timid, her anxiety evident as she held the folder. When Sarah confirmed she was ready, Jessica said, "That woman in court with the medal." She was steadfast. "If she can be that strong, I can too." Sarah accepted the folder and reviewed its contents. When she was through, she told Jessica, "You are incredibly courageous. We will see that this ends for good." Her official statement was lodged with the police at 6:15 p.m. Kevin Marsh, a victim from 2 years prior, was contacted later that evening. He consented to give a new statement, which turned rumors into a concrete case. Emma was unaware of the evening news. She was at work. She clocked in at 7, changed into fresh scrubs, and pinned her Medal of Honor above her heart. The charge nurse saw it, but stayed silent. 2 other nurses paused. One gave her a hug. The other just said, "We never knew." Emma acknowledged them with a nod. At 8:45, while checking vitals in room 312, her phone vibrated. It was a text from Admiral Callahan. "NCIS has launched a formal investigation into Brennan, for all of it. Obstruction, tampering, corruption. This is going federal. You started an avalanche, Emma." After reading the text, she put the phone away and turned to her patient, a 68-year-old veteran named Arthur Phelps. "Everything all right, dear?" he asked, pausing his stories of Korea. "Everything's perfect, Arthur. How's your breathing?" "Better." "That story on the news about the nurse with the medal. Did you see it?" "They said she pulled 3 Marines from a firefight, took 3 bullets, and never stopped." "Can you believe that? 3 times?" "It's astonishing," Emma replied softly. Arthur's eyes narrowed, shifting from her face to the medal pinned to her scrubs, then back again. Realization dawned. "Lord, have mercy," he breathed. "That's you." Emma just met his gaze, offering a silent truth. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "Get some rest." As she walked away, Arthur Phelps, the 70-year-old veteran, raised his arm in a crisp salute, holding it steady until she was out of sight. 3 weeks later, Danny Ruiz attended his 4th therapy session. He was sleeping again, eating, living in transitional housing. A case manager checked in weekly. His future was no longer a void. "I want to create something," he explained to Dr. Whitfield. "For other vets, the ones who get lost like I did." "What kind of something?" "A hotline, so the next guy sitting alone in a bar knows there's someone to call." Whitfield nodded. "That sounds like a new mission, Danny." He felt it was. That evening he called Emma. She was on her couch, watching static flicker across the screen. "I want to build a lifeline," Danny said immediately. "A number veterans can call when they're at the end of their rope." Emma put her fork down. "Tell me everything." For 20 straight minutes he laid out a plan with a fire in his voice she hadn't heard since before the ambush, before the war had broken him. When he was done, Emma said, "I'm in." "Just like that?" A real, warm laugh escaped him. "You know, I actually believe you. You should. I keep my promises." "Yeah, I know you do. Hey, Emma, I'm going to name it for him. It'll be the web line for Marcus." Emma's breath caught. Her hand went to her heart, covering the spot where the medal rested. Her throat tightened. "Danny," she whispered after a moment, "he would have loved that. That's the point." 6 months later, the web line went live. Danny ran it from a small, donated office, working a single phone for 12 hours a day. In a month, he had 3 volunteers. In 3 months, 20. Soon, The web line was handling over 200 calls a week. Patrick Brennan was indicted on federal charges. David Park lost his license. Tyler Brennan received 18 months probation. Jessica Torres and Kevin Marsh filed a civil suit. Judge Kessler, while not removed, received a formal censure, a first for Norfolk County in over a decade. 3 months after the hearing, Kessler enrolled in a military cultural competency program. Norfolk attorneys noticed a change. He became more reserved. He interrupted less. He truly listened. Admiral Thomas Callahan retired 8 months later. His farewell speech wasn't about battles. He spoke of a nurse and a Marine, saying his proudest moment in 40 years was driving to a courthouse to stand with someone who had earned the right to never stand alone. Sarah Chen was promoted to senior public defender within a year. She never again took a plea deal without scrutinizing all the evidence. On her desk sat a photo of a woman in scrubs wearing the Medal of Honor, a quiet reminder of what true courage looked like. And Emma Colton went back to her shift the very next day. She turned down every interview, every book deal, every television spot. She just reported to Norfolk General Hospital at 7 each morning, her calm presence a comfort to her patients. She wore the medal every day, not for acclaim, but for Marcus Webb, the Marine who died in her arms over Afghanistan. As long as she lived, his memory would not be forgotten. One evening, a year later, she sat on her bed at 4 in the morning. She held a warm mug, the apartment silent. For once, her phone wasn't ringing. She reached into a drawer. The velvet box was still there, but the medal was already pinned to her jacket. Closing her eyes, she sipped her coffee, and for the first time in 10 years, the face she pictured wasn't Marcus dying. It was Marcus smiling, young and full of a hope that war had failed to extinguish. She hadn't let it. Emma Colton opened her eyes. She finished her coffee, dressed, and walked into the pre-dawn quiet. Her patients were waiting. A life had to be lived. A promise made in the dust of Helmand had to be honored, to always show up, to always fight, to always carry those who fell. Some people are born heroes, some become heroes in a single act, but the rarest kind choose to be heroic every single day, in small ways the world never sees. In hospital rooms and on early morning phone calls, Emma Colton was that kind of hero. She always had been, and always would be, and the Iron Widow never needed an audience for her work.